Welcome back, everyone. This is week 3, day 2 of the paraeducator training course, and we're going to continue talking about working with students in tutoring contexts and in other contexts. Okay, one really important thing about teaching, whether it's online or in person, is establishing and maintaining attention. Of course, we're talking about the student's attention. For beginning instruction with students, it's crucial, super important, to make sure you have their undivided attention. So, how do you establish? It's very windy today, again. So, how do you establish student attention and maintain it throughout the lesson? The following are some suggestions to consider. These are some ways that we can try to establish and maintain attention. Okay, one tried and true method is to work in an area as free from distractions as possible. Yes, we want to be in an area that has a reasonable amount of noise, reasonable amount of number of windows, other people milling around, stuff like that. We want the area to be as quiet and distraction-free as possible. We know it's not always possible to be 100% distraction-free, but we can try. If you are in an area with excessive noise or student activity or other things like that, it's very difficult for some students to focus on the lesson, especially if it's a lesson that they're having trouble with or a skill that they're having trouble with. When I was a young learner, I would often tune out when we were doing a math lesson, even if it was, a tutoring lesson, because I found it challenging. All right, some things that we can do to establish and maintain attention. We need to try to excite the students about learning, get them interested in the learning process, and make the activity that we're doing with them fun, and explain it in an enthusiastic manner. If we are enthusiastic about what we are doing, sincerely enthusiastic, not in a phony way, it shows, and it goes some way towards maintaining the student's attention. All right, when we're giving directions, we want to make sure that the student is listening to what we're saying. This is the surest way to avoid questions later, like, what are we doing and how are we doing it? Of course, we can never prevent those questions from coming. They will come, but getting their attention at the beginning of the process is a good way to mitigate for some of that. Next, we want to ask the student to repeat back the directions, okay? Guys, we're going to do this. All right, what are we going to do? Have them summarize what they're supposed to do before starting the activity. Okay, these are a few techniques that you might use to help students pay attention. In the previous lecture, we talked about saying the student's name, using the student's first name. Now we're talking about also moving closer to them, especially if you're in a small group setting or tutoring setting. And you can, as the lady is doing in the picture, you can gently touch them on the shoulder or tap them on the shoulder. It's maybe like the only safe touch that you can do in a school setting. It's fairly innocuous. And if a student doesn't like being touched on the shoulder, they will let you know. We should make sure, though, we should ask, make sure it's okay. All right, so we often ask students to raise their hand in class, but what happens when the instructors raise their hands? This is a good signal that can work as an attention getter for a group of students who are talking and not paying attention. So when the educator attached to that group stops talking and raises their hand, if the students have been prepped for this, they know that they are supposed to also stop talking and raise their hands. This is one way to get that done. All right, so I think we can appreciate that students will understand the importance of a lesson if we explain to them what the objective is or why they need to know something. This goes some of the distance towards maintaining their attention as well. Okay, we want to always use reinforcement. If students know that they'll be reinforced, which is another way of saying rewarded, for learning something, they may be more motivated to pay attention. all of us like behavior reward, positive behavior reward. All right, another thing that we ought to do is to wait until everyone's ready to begin. Like the raising the hand technique, we wait in silence for the students to realize that you're waiting for their attention. We can also ask our classroom teachers what they've tried with students to establish and maintain attention. They probably have some techniques for us that could be helpful, as well as some suggestions and ideas for working with students. You know, it's not going to work every day. It's important to realize that some days are better than others as far as student attention is concerned. Things that are happening outside of the school may affect a student's ability to pay attention. And, you know, I want to acknowledge that I can stand here and give you folks tips on how to do different things, but the best knowledge comes from experience. You will figure out what works for you and what works for your groups of learners when your feet are on the ground and you're working with them. Now we're going to talk about information instructional techniques. Certain instructional techniques are essential for tutoring situations. Yesterday we talked about essential, meaning basic or primary. The supervising teacher and tutor need to assess the tutor's existing skills, find out what you already know, and then develop a plan of training. Some of you are doubtless very good at math, and others of you are more like me, better at reading and writing. So those are the kinds of things that you would determine with your classroom teacher. And sometimes you might have, you know, a para who's better at math and then a para who's better at writing, for instance. And if the teacher is lucky enough to have both of you around, then they can figure out how to best employ you in that classroom. All right, what follows are some helpful instructional techniques that tutors can use. Giving directions. We just talked about the primacy, the importance of giving directions in the beginning, making sure everyone understands the directions. Modeling, okay, so it's not this kind of modeling, but instead showing someone how a task is to be done. It's a powerful way to make sure that people understand, because we do have different types of learners in every classroom, in every group. People learn different ways, and some people learn by observing. Providing feedback, we continue to talk about providing positive feedback and reinforcing. The next one, using questioning procedures. This is all about getting the students to be metacognitive, or to think about their thinking. I don't know that we have discussed the term metacognition or metacognitive before, so let's talk about that. All right, yes, this will be our college word of the day, everyone. And it's this one. Metacognitive. Okay, so from the noun cognition, which essentially means thinking, we get cognitive. It's the adjective that has to do with thinking, essentially. And then we have metacognitive or metacognition. Every time we see the prefix meta, it kind of means outside, apart from. So when we're thinking about a process while we're doing that process, we can call that metacognition, or simply meta. Meta is it's almost a slang term these days that people use. Oh, that's so meta. We're talking about what we're doing. That's so meta. People say that now. Not just me. But when we are asking students to be metacognitive, we're asking them to think about their thinking, think about their own process of thinking. Any early childhood education course you take is going to introduce you to the idea, or continue your study of metacognition and being metacognitive. Outside thinking. Okay, responding to requests for help, super important. When students are asking for help, they're asking for us to help them further their understanding. We need to honor those requests as far as is possible. All right, each technique that we're discussing here, the information instructional techniques, involves skills to be developed by the tutor, paraeducator, to increase proficiency in offering individualized assistance. This is another way in which we are adding value to students' education. The little girl's outfit is so cute. I can't wait till my son is that age. He can hold a pencil, be writing things. All right, giving direction. The objective of instructing a tutor on giving directions is to demonstrate the formulation, the building of clear, concise verbal directions that are appropriate for the individual student. Okay, so our classroom teacher may give us directions on giving directions, right? They may give us a little bit of on-the-job training as far as this goes. They may have chosen language that they want to use when giving directions. They will definitely have chosen methods of gaining students' attention. Recording in progress. All right. Okay, so as I was saying, the teacher will give us directions on giving directions. The tutor might even practice giving directions with the teacher. Okay, so this is a little bit meta right here, but the teacher may model, right? She or he might model giving directions. Teacher can provide feedback on how easy or difficult the directions are to understand. Okay, so that has to do with language skills. Okay, it doesn't matter if English is your first language or not. We all need practice giving directions that are clear. Okay, the following are a couple of different techniques to keep in mind when doing this. We want to make sure that the student is attending. Okay, so in this case, folks, attending means paying attention. So it's just a different verb for paying attention. In another context, attending would just mean coming to class. Okay? But in this case, we mean paying attention. We want to select vocabulary that's appropriate for the student, for their age and developmental developmental stage. We want to explain the purpose of the lesson and present only one assignment at a time. Yes, so for presenting more than one at a time, the odds are high that we're going to confuse the students, and that's what we want to avoid. Okay, modeling. The objective, the purpose of modeling is to demonstrate to the student, show the student what they are expected to do in the lesson. Here's an example. If a student is expected to fold and number their paper a certain way, then the tutor might model this. Do it first. They might model this to the student by doing it as they give the directions. How about providing feedback? It's another of the skills that we're talking about today. In providing feedback, the focus is on maintaining a positive and motivating relationship with the student. Verbal and nonverbal reinforcement techniques can be used to guide the student to keep working on task. So staying on task, that's a phrase that applies to student attention and student maintenance of focus. All right, so we can make remarks like, good, you're remembering that what you do to one side must also be done to the other side. This sounds a lot like a math lesson, right? Somebody's doing something correctly with some fractions or something like that. These kinds of remarks encourage students who have not mastered a concept to keep working toward the goal. When students respond correctly, they can be praised in a manner that is selected for its ability to express encouragement and support. I'll say this 50 more times in this course, but the praise has got to be authentic. It's got to be sincere. School children are like sharks. They're a little bit like sharks. They can smell blood in the water, right? So if you are being insincere, they will detect it like that. What we want to do, I mean, the point of all that is that we want to boost people up. We want to help grow their confidence, make them feel like they can do things, and then show them that they can do things. A couple of skills that are important to lesson delivery include starting promptly at the assigned time. Now, I know that's not going to be possible every time. I know. Take our class, for example. Sometimes in a Zoom meeting, I'll wait for 5 or 10 minutes for people to come. I really do want to begin when I do a synchronous class. I really do want to begin with as many people there as possible, just because it makes it so there are fewer questions later about something that we talked about. Less confusion later. But this is about structure. In terms of school children, starting promptly at the assigned time is about providing structure. We don't know what people's lives are like at home. Not really. We don't really know what they're like at home. But the school might be the place where they get the best food of their day. Bless them if that's the case. It may be the place where they have the most positive adult contact of the day, right? With you, the paraeducators and the teachers. And it may be the place where they have structure, where other points in their life are unstructured. Okay, we don't know. It's like that for some folks. But even for folks who do have a lot of structure in their lives, they really tend to appreciate having that reproduced or mirrored in a school setting. All right, now we want to follow the teacher's schedule of activities, of course. In delivering lessons, of course, we remember that we want to follow the instructions for tutoring that are outlined by the teacher. When we come to a place where we're not sure what to do, we just ask the teacher. When in doubt, talk it out, right? They will always have an answer for us. Earlier, we talked about level appropriate and age appropriate praise, comments, language. We also want to talk about level appropriate expectations. In the last module, we had the college word du jour, which was ZPD, the zone of proximal development, which referred to the space between where a learner is and where they need to get next. If I'm describing it very broadly, we want to make that space able to be crossed by the student, so they'll experience success. So that's why we try to set realistic expectations. And some of that is about differentiation of instruction. All right, we want to use questioning techniques that direct instruction and require more than yes or no answers. In the pretest for this unit, we talked about open-ended questions. And this is us paying it off, because this is exactly what we're talking about here. Asking open-ended questions, using questioning techniques, get students to think about their learning. It gets them to be metacognitive. I should really make a list of all of our college words, shouldn't I? All right, lesson delivery skills continued. We need to learn to listen to the student and what they are saying. We also want to give them our full attention. Okay, so we demand their full attention. We ought to give them our full attention as well. Otherwise, they will sense the inequality in that and become less cooperative. I think anyone with kids knows that. All right, we also need to pay attention to nonverbal cues exhibited by the student. Okay, that means I don't want to talk. I don't want to participate. you know, anybody hearing me talk has already had a lifetime of picking up on nonverbal cues. You know, you could also call it extra linguistic communication, communication that's outside of words. And we need to pay attention to those in our school children. Right, again, we want to continuously give feedback to the student about their performance. We want to reinforce them, of course. We want to be consistent, follow the rules, and provide structure. So whatever, I'm sure you would agree, whatever rules we establish, if we don't follow them ourselves, the students will notice right away, and they may call us on that. We need to be sure to close the lesson. So what do you think? What would we do if our school has a bell system? What would we do if the bell rings and the lesson isn't over? The kids are going to pop up like popcorn and start flying out the door, right? But if they have been, that's the fear. But if we have sort of socialized them to expect closure on a lesson because we consistently provide closure, we will be able to say, hold on, we just need to finish this up, and then we can all put our pens away and push our chairs in and all that kind of thing. And that'll go much more easily if it's something that we do every day. I'm going to record myself talking about it. Okay. Strengthening students' skills. Guidelines for reinforcing students during instructional activities are an important component of the tutoring plan. We remember that reinforcement has to do with boosting the student up. The reinforcement should focus on the student's demonstration of appropriate behavior or completion of a specific task. Depending on the age and skill level of the student, many different techniques can be used. Often, verbal reinforcement is appropriate, while other students respond better to stickers, free time, or edible rewards. It depends on the student, you know, and you'll figure out who prefers what. The teacher should explain and demonstrate to the tutor the method of reinforcement that has been selected for each student. Teacher may have experience with the students that we don't have yet, and may be able to offer some very helpful suggestions. Some students may have specific behavior plans that state when and what types of reinforcement should be used. These behavior plans, they're kind of like contracts between the student, school administration, their parents, teachers, all that kind of thing. You will encounter students with behavior plans. Be sure to check with your supervising teacher about these types of plans. Here are some examples of authentic sounding verbal reinforcement. I knew you could do it. Way to go. Good job. See how much you've improved. This looks better than the last time. You're doing much better. You're really becoming an expert at this. Okay, so if we're just looking at the list here, looking at the top of the list, we have these sort of simpler, more general ones. Way to go. Good job. And then we move down to reinforcement that addresses specific behavior. Let's think about these things. Let's think about what other examples of specific verbal reinforcement we could come up with. Recording myself now. Here's some examples of nonverbal reinforcement. We can smile. You can smile at the student. You can do that from anywhere in the room, right? You can pat the student on the shoulder. You can laugh with the student. You can give help if help is asked for. Nod our head. Give the thumbs up sign, right? There's the sarcastic thumbs up, right? That's not the real thumbs up. Yeah, thumbs up with the sincere face. There's that one. Some students respond better to things like stickers, Free time, that would be my daughter. She loves the stickers. Free time, pencils. Here's a new pencil for you. Computer use, edible rewards. Of course, we have to keep in mind what limitations there might be, what parameters there might be on those at each campus. Some campuses, for example, are completely nut-free because of the prevalence of nut allergies. Maybe your kid's campus is. Some students like to be able to help other students. So we might use that as a reward, as a reinforcement. Or we can give extra recess time. This is the kind of thing, of course, we want to clear with the classroom teacher, but some people really respond well to that. Why do we do it? Why do we reinforce? Well, it provides clear feedback on correct responses, clear and immediate feedback. It also redirects. We can use this to redirect incorrect responses through questions in a positive way. Reinforcement praises learners for working independently. It also supports and encourages learners throughout the tutoring process. So praise going in, praise coming out. All right. What are two reasons? Think back to, oh my gosh, I'm all over the place. All right, here's a couple of different reasons for reinforcement. Aha, do you remember? What are two reasons for using reinforcement? Why would we do that? You might have your own reasons for reinforcing the learners. Here we go, recording myself. Okay, next I'd like to show you a couple of short videos. Please take a look at the teachers in the classroom settings in these videos and take note of the types of reinforcement that they're using and also the number of times that they use it. Let's see how often they do these things. And we want to come out of this video viewing session with these questions. First off, are there differences in the types of reinforcement that they use in the first video and in the second video? And please explain.
There you go. I like the way you two are sharing now and taking turns. While he's doing that, can you get the next one going?
Vincy, I'm glad you're still working.
You know, right? Don't even say it. You know. Like you know in your brain. Okay, here we go. Red table. I can't hear him at all. Can you hear him? Can't hear him. Can't hear him. I noticed that was kind of a long time for you to sit still, but I gotta tell you, you really watched me and kept your eyes on me. I know you got a little excited. I like that you got your mouth and you got yourself back under control, so I'm really proud of you. Thanks, Luce Anthony. Have a seat, friend.
In this video, we will define and give some examples of different types of reinforcers. We will explain why we use reinforcers and provide some key points on how to use them to maximize their effectiveness. A reinforcer is anything contingent on a behavior that increases the likelihood of a behavior recurring. Simply put, reinforcers are rewards that we use to signal to a child that he or she has responded correctly and to encourage the child to respond the same way again. Reinforcers provide motivation and essential feedback to the child and strengthen learned responses. There are an endless variety of ways that you can reinforce a child. Here is a list of a few options. The most basic type of reinforcer that you can use is food or drink. If you give a child a piece of a desired food or a sip of a favorite beverage after responding correctly to a task, the child will be more likely to respond the same way again. Food or drink can be excellent reinforcers, especially at the beginning of therapy when you are still determining what the child might find rewarding. Other reinforcers include favorite toys, physical touch, and activities such as tickles, bouncy knee rides, or hugs as rewards for correct responses. If the child enjoys these things, they can be wonderful reinforcers. Another useful reinforcer is task avoidance. Ending the task at hand can be very rewarding for many children. Removing the teaching materials from the table, throwing away quiz cards as they are finished, or allowing the child to get up and leave can be very potent reinforcers.
Do this. Marvelous! Do this. Do this. That's right, Corey! Do this.
Do this.
Wonderful! Do this.
Do this.
Amazing! Let's go play!
Another important type of reinforcer is verbal praise. Verbal praise is a bit different from the reinforcers mentioned so far because most children with autism will likely be indifferent to verbal praise at first. However, verbal praise is very commonly used in our society today. Therefore, it is important to teach children with autism to learn how to enjoy it. To accomplish this, we must always include verbal praise with the other types of rewards that we use.
Touch shoe. Oh, way to go. I love how hard you're working. Good work. I've got more crackers.
By consistently pairing verbal praise with other rewards, such as food, toys, or physical touch, the children will slowly learn to enjoy it. The last types of reinforcers that we will discuss are counters and token systems. When counters or tokens are used, the child earns tokens or points that can be exchanged for rewards. Here is an example of a counter in which the child must earn all the pieces of a puzzle in order to get the end reward.
What do you want? Some? Alrighty.
Oh, why? Oh, why?
Look, we're gonna get all the cars.
Yeah.
Then cookie. Yay!
Yay.
Shoes. Oh, here it comes. Put it on. There, you got one. Wow.
One more.
Shoes. Here, let me put it on for you. There it goes. Boink. Shoes. Wonderful. Do, 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 do. There you go. Shoes. Boink, boink, bloop.
I'll pull it on this one.
Shoes. Boink. You need one more, then you get cookie. Shoes. Here it goes. Boink. Look, you got all your cars. Time for cookie! Yummy, 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 yummy!
Counters and tokens tend to be used when children are slightly more advanced in their treatment programs. They allow us to teach children to work for short periods of time without receiving a concrete reward. Many different kinds of counters can be generated, and we can vary the number of responses needed to get the end reward.
Clap hands.
Now that we have explained what reinforcers are, let's talk about why we use them.
There it goes.
One reason we use reinforcement is to provide feedback about the correctness of a response. Because children with autism have difficulty processing language, we must rely on reinforcers to let children know when they have responded in the way that we want.
Fox.
The second reason we use reinforcement is to motivate the child to learn. Our goal is to make therapy so reinforcing that the child looks forward to this time of day as the time of day when great things happen. There are several key points to keep in mind in order to maximize the effectiveness of reinforcement. If a child gives the correct response, we must deliver the reinforcement immediately. The therapist must be enthusiastic and involved, and the reinforcement must be varied. These components ensure that we reinforce the target behavior. The reinforcement must be immediate because if reinforcement is delayed, we might inadvertently reinforce something the child does after the target behavior. By reinforcing immediately, we let the child know clearly which response was correct. Reinforcement is also more effective if we involve ourselves in whatever type of reinforcement we are using. Make the play fun. For example, if we are giving a child a piece of food, instead of just placing it on the table for the child, we can fly it to the child like an airplane.
Chips. Oh, wow, that was great. Yummy.
Do
This
puzzle.
way, we become reinforcers for the child.
Marvelous, Corey. Which one? Awesome.
The last point is to ensure that reinforcement is varied. Varying reinforcement means two things. First, we must constantly change reinforcers. Second, we must vary the intensity of reinforcement depending on how the child responds. Constantly changing a reinforcer means that a reinforcer should not be used more than twice in a row before another reinforcer is substituted. If a child is given the same reinforcer repeatedly, the child will get bored with it and no longer find it rewarding. This is called satiation, and it can greatly slow down the progress of a child. Varying the intensity of reinforcement is called differential reinforcement. Differential reinforcement means that the child will receive a more preferred reward for better effort or a well-executed response. By saving the best reinforcers for the child's biggest efforts, we encourage the child to put forth a maximum effort. Now that we have defined reinforcers and talked about how to use them, we need to discuss how to develop new reinforcers. We must be constantly searching for new and effective reinforcers in order to vary them and avoid satiation. One way to develop new reinforcers is to observe what the child enjoys doing during free play. Favorite toys can be reserved for use in therapy or used as rewards after therapy. If the child likes television, he or she could earn tokens towards watching 5 minutes of television. Another way of finding new reinforcers is to modify a child's existing self-stimulatory behaviors. Gazing at a light, arm flapping, spinning, and lining things up in rows are all common self-stimulatory behaviors. It is often possible to modify these behaviors so that they are non-disruptive and more socially acceptable. For example, if a child likes to gaze at lights, you could teach the child to enjoy playing with a kaleidoscope and then use that toy as a reward. Finally, You can test for new reinforcers using a reinforcement survey. To do this, present the child with a choice of 2 potential reinforcers and keep track of which one the child chooses. Once you find a reinforcer that works to motivate the child, you should not allow the child to play with it outside of therapy. And within therapy, you should limit the time that the child has access to the reinforcer to about 10 to 20 seconds each time it is used. By reserving reinforcers for therapy, you increase the chances that the child will remain interested in them and motivated to learn. So far in this video, we have defined reinforcement and given some examples of different types of reinforcers. We explained why we use reinforcers and provided some examples of how to use them to maximize their effectiveness. We also discussed ways to develop reinforcers that are the most effective for each child.
Okay, recording myself. Let's talk about closure, ending a tutoring session or ending a lesson of any kind, really. What are the reasons for it? One is that it draws attention. The first is that it draws attention to the end of the lesson. We want to make sure that they notice, right? It also helps the students to organize their learning. It's more of the structure that I was talking about before. We saw in the second video that after the student completed the block building exercise, the educator helped her clear the board with a very obvious, gesture. And then the student knew that the lesson was coming to an end, and the therapist said, "And now we can go play." Right. So that's a clear closure and then a transition to another activity. All right. Sometimes we reinforce the major points of the lesson at the close of the lesson. Closure allows students to practice what's learned and provides an opportunity for feedback and review. So we might review at the end. Imagine that in our closure activities, we review what's been done, mistakes that were made, or things that were learned is another way that we could frame that. It's a good opportunity to tell students where they have been successful. Praise in, praise out. Each lesson should have its own conclusion. We want to base that on the type of material being studied and the type of learning activities being used in the lesson. So one type of closure for a science lesson may not work the same way it would work for an English lesson. As a tutor, you should work with the teacher to establish an effective way to end each lesson. Probably they will have methods that they like to use. Here are some different ways that we can provide closure. Summarizing the high points of the lesson. Today we learned da, 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 da. Or we can ask the students to summarize certain points in the lesson. Or we can simply ask questions of students about the lesson. What was that? Do you remember that? Right, these kinds of things. We can ask for questions, allow students to ask questions about the lesson. At the end of the lesson, maybe less likely to ask questions than during the lesson. We could also have activities that are directly related to the lesson at the end of the lesson to put a coda on it, put closure on it. And we could connect the lesson with previous activities and provide information about what will come next. Here are some different things we can say, different statements that we can use to provide closure. Here's one. Before moving on, let's review the main points that we've already covered. There's another one. Pedro, could you please summarize what we've talked about up to this point? And we can make sure to cycle through the students, so it's not always Pedro that has to talk. Agni, what were the main points we discussed today? This is another powerful way to close. Does anyone have questions about what we've gone over today? No, we don't have any questions. Okay, so then we want to do a verbal check for comprehension. Okay, what would you do? What would you do in these situations? The lesson that the teacher planned for 20 minutes is completed in 10 minutes. This will happen. Oh yeah. It's not such a problem if the lesson goes over, but if it goes under time, as an educator, you might be left sitting there wondering what you are supposed to do at this point. Recording myself. All right, deviating from the lesson plan, okay, kind of getting away from the lesson plan. Sometimes it might be necessary to end a lesson before it's finished or before the scheduled time is up. This lesson that we will see now talks about some of the reasons for ending a lesson and gives some suggestions for effectively dealing with the problem. Okay, let's talk about finishing the lesson plan early. Imagine a student does not appear to have the basic skills necessary to complete an activity, or a student is too upset to continue the lesson, or a student completes a lesson in less than the allotted time, less time than has been given, or the student is making errors on every problem, and not on purpose, not as an act of defiance, but just error in a sequence. Or if the student's behavior doesn't allow you to continue, this can happen. Sometimes a child might stop and refuse to do anything else. Or they might just display some clear frustration with the lesson. Other times, another event or emergency in the classroom might require your immediate attention. Keep in mind, we could be pulled away, we could be called away at any time by something the school needs us to do or something the classroom teacher needs us to do. So that happens too. Well, I hope you've enjoyed week 3, day 2, talking about some more working with students techniques.